But here we go. So first of all, a warm welcome to everyone. Fantastic to have you with us. A special welcome to our guests, Anna-Karin Lindblom from Husqvarna, Håkan Schild from Scania, and John Abramson from Ericsson. Terrific to have you with us. I hope that everyone who's not on screen is having a good breakfast. What we're going to talk about today is engaging with platform-based collaboration and competition, from hype to actionable strategies. Maybe a few things to say about this title. One, collaboration and competition is really important. We see this, we define platform-based strategies as broader than a two-sided market setup which creates competition between actors on the platform. So we want to explore other types of models as well. And from hype to actionable strategies is because we have Håkan, Anna-Karin, and John here to talk about how you and your companies work with these topics. We definitely don't see this as a topic where we know everything. Quite the contrary, we think that this is very much an evolving topic. And Anna and Claire and I, and as well as Matthias Larsen Kalander, who's an industry PhD with us, we see in our research that there is a lot to be discovered that has not yet been discovered about how platforms work and how companies and of course other organizations as well can leverage platform strategies in their development. So that's a little bit the background. Let's take a look at the agenda and see where we are with that. So, short introduction, and then Anna and Claire will go through partly some basics in terms of ecosystems in particular, so that we are sure that we talk about the same things. There are quite a few different flavors in this area. And Claire and Anna will also comment briefly or describe briefly some of our current research and what we think we are seeing in some of the research that we're conducting in relation to the topic today. And after that, we will have a panel with Anna-Karin, John, and Håkan to explore some of the many open questions in this field. After that, we'll have a Q&A, and then we'll do a short breakout into different smaller rooms to talk more about ways of developing actionable strategies in your various organizational settings. And somewhere around 9:15, we've said to 9:30, so somewhere between 9:15 and 9:30, we plan to wrap up. So that's the plan. I see that some of you are already using the chat, which is excellent. So please continue to do that, and we'll try to capture comments and questions in the chat. Just a few words about the House of Innovation at the Stockholm School of Economics. The House of Innovation is a new environment for research, teaching, and outreach at the school. We've collected all our resources, consolidated all our resources in the areas of digital innovation, entrepreneurship, and innovation in one department, in one research environment. And we have several research centers collaborating together to explore topics in this area. So we're very much research-led, very interdisciplinary, and very impact-focused is our strategy. Maybe, and just to give you a flavor of some of the projects we're running, quite a few projects. And the key thing, I think, really with this slide is that we're seeing that academic areas that used to be separate, entrepreneurship, innovation, technology, they are no longer separate. They're very much overlapping, and they're overlapping more and more. And this reflects really what is happening in a lot of companies. Innovation is no longer just R&D. Digital innovation is not what the IT department is doing. And entrepreneurship is much more a mindset and an approach rather than something which is confined only to small startups. So all of these ideas and concepts and theories are becoming much more intertwined. And as you can see on the fringes of this slide, here are some of the projects that we're currently conducting. We actually have quite a few more projects, but these are some of the things we're working on right now. So on the left-hand side, you see several AI-related projects, as well as platform-related. We're very proud to host a national innovation environment for cancer detection, prevention, and treatment called Vision Zero Cancer. And we also engage in design thinking in various aspects of entrepreneurship, and as well as other topics. So feel free to visit our website and get in touch with us after the seminar as well. Great. So I think that's all I had that's related specifically to us. So let's get on with the show. So over to the sort of recap and research introduction, over to Anna and Claire, please.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Magnus. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Anna S., and I'm an associate professor at House of Innovation. And let's just kick off by reflecting briefly on how ecosystems and platforms are thought of and discussed today, and reflect on some definitions just to avoid too much confusion around these terms. So if you put on the next slide, yes. And these terms, ecosystems and platforms, are obviously very much discussed today, right? We've all seen these hyped descriptions of the possibilities tied to platforms. For instance, this quote, I hope you can see it, is from a recent book by leading platform analysts, and they write about the fantastic financial success that is possible through platform-based business models. The platform owners can reap, the decreasing marginal costs, the benefits of that, combined with the asset-light features of many digital platforms today. These kinds of arguments are very much communicated in the literature and in media. The great possibilities tied to platform-based business models. Yet most discussions also end by arguing that, well, many platforms fail, and in fact, a lot of firms are not maybe capable of becoming Amazon or Google. So this sort of leaves firms and organizations with two choices. Either you strive to become the next Amazon or Google, or you sort of give up. And we think that this sort of discussion is too one-sided and leaves a lot of firms a little bit paralyzed and scared. And so what alternatives do we have then? So that's the background in a way to this seminar, that we would like to open up the discussion about what could be an actionable platform strategy, and what kind of ecosystem are you really trying to join or to create. So next slide, please. Let's return to some mainstream definitions of ecosystems. How can they be understood in the first place? Well, ecosystems have been discussed for decades, haven't they? And there are different kinds of ecosystems, and often we talk about different things, while we just keep repeating that we all want to create ecosystems. So some examples of the different nuances of ecosystems are provided in this figure. Business ecosystems, for instance, on the right-hand side, have been discussed for a very long time, and that line of thinking tends to depart from a commercial firm, and encourages the firm to sort of lift the gaze and think about and be mindful of the many suppliers, consumers, regulators, and other partners in its environment. And most thinking about business ecosystems emphasize what the firm needs to do in order to capitalize on its resources and satisfy its customers. So business ecosystems thinking is usually focusing on existing positions, but encourages the firm to be mindful of its relationship with existing actors in the environment. Then we have knowledge ecosystems, which has traditionally been focusing more on how to jointly create new knowledge. For instance, knowledge ecosystems involving research hubs, entrepreneurs, sharing resources, non-proprietary resources. And that obviously is a different kind of ecosystem that requires other coordination mechanisms and aims for other kinds of outputs than a business ecosystem. Innovation ecosystems have traditionally maybe been discussed much in terms of like clusters and geographically proximal actors, entrepreneur startups mediated by some innovation hub, policymakers, but now obviously they're increasingly discussed as digitally mediated ecosystems, and we'll return to that point. Exactly, a recent definition of an innovation ecosystem is that it's the alignment structure of a multilateral set of partners that need to interact in order for a specific focal value proposition to be realized. So innovation ecosystems today are often targeting some sort of value proposition that is so complex that no single actor can achieve that value proposition alone. So instead we need to join forces and find our position in the production of that value or that solution. So at general level, ecosystems can be understood as, you know, the joining of many different legally independent organizations or unities. They choose to join forces, not because they have to, not because there is a hierarchical relationships and someone forcing them to join, but they choose to affiliate with an ecosystem because they want to reap the benefits of interacting with other actors in the ecosystem. So there's usually no formal authority, yet these partnerships or collaborations need to be coordinated, obviously, and so some sort of focal entity is needed, and that can be an organization or a set of organizations, but it can also increasingly be a digital platform that coordinates the exchanges between all these actors. So if you go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So digital platforms are mediating the exchanges between many different actors, and platforms are also on everyone's lips, aren't they? And they can also be defined in many different ways. But in this context today, let's depart from a very general description of platforms as some shared functionality that mediates the interactions between many different actors that join the platform. So just a few examples of different platforms can be relevant for us to keep in mind when we discuss today. Sorry, if you go back, Claire, thank you. Platforms can focus on different kinds of interactions. So to the left-hand side, for instance, we have transaction platforms that serve primarily as a marketplace, facilitating the interactions between producers and consumers, helping them to find each other and facilitating their exchanges. We have complementarity platforms that rather focus on not only mediating exchanges between producers and consumers, but also helping producers to leverage their input by allowing producers to combine their offerings with other producers. So allowing recombination among producers, enabling innovation of speedier innovation and cheaper innovation, because you can reuse the common functionality of a platform as a producer. then some platforms are doing both. They are both facilitating transactions, payments, for instance, between actors, and providing a great development environment for producers. So thereby allowing economies of scope in innovation, not only economies of scale. Thanks. Next slide, please. Yes, so these are just a few examples of the different types of platforms. One may want to add that we also have production platforms, and that's obviously been something that Scania has been working on. These types of platforms can be applied internally within the firm to allow, for instance, many components to be combined in different ways by using a shared core set of assets in production cycles or across supply chains. But today we will focus, I guess, mainly on platforms mediating relationships between a set of actors in an ecosystem, so across industries even. Thank you. Next slide, Claire, please. Yeah.
So implicit in the discussion that Anna's been having is that there is some sort of focal entity. And one usually assumes that it's something like this. If you think of Google, if you think of the Apple App Store, one usually thinks of the platform and the actor as being the same, and a platform being controlled by a single actor. But what is increasingly happening is actually that you see the same complementarity and the same possibilities. But the control is actually federated. So you have a group of actors, multiple organizations, maybe some firms and some government organizations, for instance, or authorities. And the experience from the perspective of the consumer is more or less the same, because they still just see the platform. But it can be very important to have this federated control from the perspective of the organizations controlling it, in order to make sure, and somebody mentioned in the chat a moment ago, that coordination and making sure that you avoid disagreements becomes a very important part of ecosystem strategy. This is one way of avoiding those kinds of disagreements, where you have shared goal setting, you have shared rule setting, and ultimately you have a sharing of the actual value that is created through the platform. So this is a control and governance structure, and really can be used for any kind of the platforms that Anna previously discussed. So you could have a shared transaction platform, you could have a shared complementarity platform, or you could have a shared integration platform, and there's no reason why that shouldn't happen. And particularly of interest is when you have these large, complex undertakings, which we're seeing more and more as digitalization becomes increasingly complex. This design of a federated platform not only becomes more interesting, but actually becomes more contemporary. And I see there's some interesting questions here. I think we're going to take them up a little later, but it's good that you're using the chat to bring up these questions. Maybe some of them will be answered in our research paper, because this is part of what we wanted to bring up today. Is we're doing some incredibly interesting research looking at this kind of federated platform, where you have multiple actors trying to collaborate. They're trying to take technologies and knowledge that already exists and recombine them towards some new innovation. In this particular case, the case is an end-to-end automated public transport ecosystem. So automated from the bus on the ground to the metro to the platform system that both collects the data around how the ecosystem is being used, but also then uses the data to self-regulate the whole ecosystem. So it really is automated end-to-end, with lots of moving parts, whether it's the buses or the algorithms or the platforms involved. So very, very, very complex, both on the level of the actors involved and the technologies involved. But also in this particular case, we're looking at a nascent ecosystem. So it's at the fairly early stages. And that means that there's a lot of ambiguity about what the future will look like and how to combine all of these moving parts in the best possible way. Again, on the one hand, so that so that there's enough cooperation so that the goals are realized, but also that there's some sort of competition for the value that's created, and that all of the organizations involved actually capture some value, because of course that's part of the point, right? When you're a for-profit firm is to capture value. And so what we see here is, in our particular case, a move from building a nascent innovation ecosystem to turning that collaborative innovation ecosystem into a platform ecosystem. And so what we see, so if you look on the right, you then have an image of this automated ecosystem, automated public transport ecosystem. And what it starts with in our research is the actors pre-forming among themselves. So they're aiming for this ecosystem, and the vision of the ecosystem that they have actually affects how they collaborate today. And so what happens is all of these multiple actors come together, and they go from being actors and groups of actors that maybe collaborate on a more limited scale to a complex collaboration, but a collaboration that historically has been characterized as being hierarchical, as having supplier relationships rather than flat value creating relationships. And so the first step is around this reconstitution of the actor relationships, so that the focus is on flat value creation or flat collaboration in order to best collaborate with the aim of the particular platform ecosystem that they ultimately want to build. And in doing that, they're working towards some sort of unclear or ambiguous future vision where there were lots of future possibilities. And there's this interesting dynamic where they form a protovision of future possibilities. So together the actors work in their new constellation to form a set of future possibilities. But of course, it's not certain, it's not set in stone. There's this back and forth dynamic where as they pre-form, as they work towards that future vision, the vision itself actually changes. And so you see the pre-formation activities, which they're doing in the innovation ecosystem, and the protovisioning, which is their vision of the ambiguous future platform ecosystem, actually feeding back and affecting one another. So to break it down more explicitly, on the one hand, pre-formation is very much about the innovation ecosystem. It's very much about how to collaborate. It's very much about maintaining the relationships and setting up the relationships in such a way that the protovision of the future platform ecosystem, as much as it changes, can be realized. And so that protovision is the vision of possible platform ecosystem outcomes. So the pre-formation enables the realization and also the kind of reconstitution and of that protovision. But then of course the reverse works as well. You form the innovation with the intention of realizing a platform ecosystem down the line, and so the vision that you have affects how the relationships are formed today. And I think that those two dynamics are really interesting and really important for organizations looking to create both innovation and platform ecosystems. And it's precisely, or at least partly, why we gave some of the definitions that Anna discussed earlier. It's partly, of course, to make sure that we're on the same page, but partly also to say, right, well, if you have a protovision of something that you're looking to create, what is it? Let's talk specificities. Let's talk about the possibilities, and try to break down some of that ambiguity, and in order to engage in the relationship building now that will allow that to be realized. And yeah, so that's pretty important. And this is just interesting for later when we release the slides, just to give you some meat to bite into, if you will, around these future platform possibilities. So that's some of the interesting research that we're doing here, and I guess is also then the background for our panel and future discussions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Anna and Claire. So we have several interesting questions in the chat, and I've captured some of them. I think it's, I see, for example, a question about corporate values and how they fit in, incentivizing participants in an ecosystem, and also sort of first steps. And I think now it's time to move into our panel. We have Anna-Karin, Jan, and Håkan with us. So again, most welcome. And maybe to start with, if you'd like to just say a few words about yourselves so that our guests know a little bit about where you're coming from when we start discussing. Anna-Karin, you're in my upper leftmost corner on my screen, so let's start with you.
Yeah, so you're kind of in the middle of my screen. So I'm Anna-Karin Lindblom, very happy to be here today. Super interesting subjects, which raises probably more questions than answers. But I believe that we can probably together come up with some answers. So I'm with Husqvarna Group. I'm Director of Accelerated Innovation. Means that I work a lot with different types of partners to help us at Husqvarna to test new concepts, new ideas with customers in the market as early as possible to learn what to do and what not to do. I would say that's probably a good summary.
Great, thank you, Anna-Karin. Håkan, please.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning. My name is Håkan Schilt. Great to be here. And I'm with Scania. I'm vice president of our business unit called Autonomous Solutions, which is about taking the autonomous technology to our customers, deploy it, and operate it. So that's what I'm doing with my everyday work.
Thank you, Håkan. And Jan, please.
Yes, thank you, Magnus. Good morning, everyone. Jan Abramson, working in Ericsson Group, responsible for a unit that is, well, listening to you guys, the SEC team. Basically, what we do is work with these topics. Ericsson has selected about 15 or 20 companies around the world that we feel are super important in terms of understanding these questions, how to collaborate and leverage horizontal technologies into value. So myself and my team are working as advisors and consultants to the management teams of these companies to together form an idea about what these ecosystems can look like and how we can collaborate across these industries.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Terrific. So let's launch straight into the conversation. So I think maybe if we look at what's going on in this realm, a lot of things are happening. Quite a lot of things are not happening, or I would say organizations are approaching ways of pushing innovation further in terms of the platform strategies. I think one of the most interesting things perhaps is the first steps. How do you get started? Because in your organizations and in the organizations that you work with, there are already very well established, even institutionalized relationships and roles and interaction patterns. So when you start something that is intended to come up with a new model for interaction and collaboration and competition for that matter, how do you take the first steps? Because I could see that those steps could be very disruptive to your existing relationships. Anna-Karin, is this a question that you'd like to bite into?
Yeah, and I mean, you're for sure right that it's disruptive and it's kind of going towards where we're coming from. If you're a more than 330-year-old company and you're leading in your industry, it's difficult to start thinking about letting others in. You know, what will that what will that bring? Will it be good? It's really threatening, but I think it's inevitable, because when in our strategy work, we are looking much more on delivering wider solutions, looking at where can we provide value to our customers, more than actually with like the hardware focused solutions that we've been doing for a long time. And then when you start thinking about the different business models, alternatives, platform strategies, and ecosystems and collaborations, they are really high on the agenda. So then I think the way to start is to find others that are in the same situation. For example, we're working with Combient, where we have a lot of companies like Scania and Ericsson, and where there is an environment where we openly can discuss these challenges and opportunities.
And just to interject, Combient is a non-competitive collaboration and innovation environment with roughly 30 companies, I believe, involved. So that creates sort of a friendly environment in which to develop and test ideas. But how do you know, how in your case, of course, you have a distribution network and you have lots of dealers for your equipment that interface with the end customers. So, you know, what's your strategy for managing disruption in a way that doesn't disrupt, if I'm allowed to say
I'm not
stupid.
sure we have a strategy that will not disrupt, but I think, I mean, there will be cases where there will be big disruption, where we will see a completely different model to reach out to our customers. There will be, I mean, there are of course strategies. How do we leverage the setup that we have today, and how do we involve our distributor network, for example? So. But I think that's a balance act, and it is, as we don't know the answers and how it will play out, it is really, really important to test this different concept in small scale early on.
That's interesting. So how can you give an example of how you do that?
Well, one example is that we work together with SEB for data sharing, for like a robot as a service solution. That's one thing. But we have in different areas, we are trying out solutions where we will reach the market in different ways. Then, of course, mostly through digital platforms.
And you're doing that with real customers as well?
Yes.
With sort of pilot and customers involved.
Yes. And just doing this work is also per se like an ecosystem or platform way of working, because it's not something we can do ourselves. It often involves areas where we are not the experts or where we don't have the best technology. And then we need to find partners to include in this total solution to the customer. Sometimes you only see us, but sometimes it's like a joint go-to-market.
Interesting. So that means that not only are you prototyping the service itself, but you're really sort of prototyping the future ecosystem, because that is part of delivering the prototype services, I understand.
Yeah, well, I mean, at least we're trying to, and we have realized that this is going to be very important.
Yeah. Thank you, Anna-Karin. So Håkan, this must be very different for you, or is it? I'm thinking that if we think about autonomous transportation, this is something that requires societal infrastructure on a very large scale. So, you know, how and I would presume that whatever innovation you do in terms of business models and moving perhaps towards a more platform-based model has somehow to relate to these large infrastructural investments. How do you manage that without sort of getting paralyzed and just waiting for something to happen?
Yeah, I think infrastructure is to some extent required, but at the same time, we are developing the autonomous technology to be able to handle with the existing infrastructure. If it is a shift in the transportation industry, but it's not to the same extent as when the railways were introduced, or when the combustion engine, where we had to build entirely brand new infrastructure. We can utilize the existing infrastructure, but we need some supporting or complementary. But I think from our side, what we have started with doing is a value network analysis. We've been looking at what will the transportation system in an autonomous and an electrified and connected world, what will it look like, and which contributors will be part of that ecosystem, and what is the value creation that they will bring, and trying to dimension that. That gives a pretty good foundation for us to understand who do we need to collaborate with in order to make this happen. We have some experience of doing platforms before at Scania, and I think traditionally we started a lot with the IT part of it, etc. But I think starting from the point, who's creating value? Is there a business for all the participants in the ecosystem? And is it possible to form some sort of value network amongst it? I think that's a crucial part, because if there's no money, there won't be any players in the ecosystem either.
And that's a little bit also a hen and egg problem, I presume, is because when you say if there isn't any money, but the sort of the future existence of money needs to be discovered, right?
Sure. But right now we are, I mean, the whole autonomous part is in an extreme hype, and has been so for quite a few years. So there's a lot of venture capital flowing into this part, and
right,
quite a lot. That's
interesting. So in a way, you can leverage the hype.
Sure, but then we're going down the slope of disillusionment as well.
Yeah. So I guess it would be stupid to ask how do you avoid that, because that's a typical, if you know the answer to that, you don't have to work anymore.
It's coming. There's always a slope of disillusionment.
So I'd like to turn over to Jan, because Jan, you have the special situation that, at least if we believe the Ericsson website, you have part of the solution to many problems known and unknown, namely a technology that allows very fast communication. But that also, I guess, leads to the question: do you see yourself as an integrated actor in the ecosystems that you see being formed, or do you see yourself as a technology provider for others who shape ecosystems around their businesses? Are you sort of an external supplier, or are you a collaborator, and how so?
I think that it's spot on, because it's one of the more interesting changes that this company is going through in its long history, and we are clearly moving from a classical, if you like, vertical supplier relationship with our customers to increasingly, I would say, in the last 2 years or 3 years, and now accelerating, becoming much more of an ecosystem enabler, facilitator, not always leader. These things are fluid, as Claire was saying. And being shaped and explored as we speak, but the technology we provide and that we are at the moment rolling out around the world in about 100 countries or so is 5G networks, and 5G networks basically are transforming the way many industries and companies can add value, create value, leading to a whole range of new use cases and applications that were not possible a few years ago, and since most of this is driven by these use cases and new applications, all companies come to the table with, or most of them, with an open mind, if I may say. because to explore and execute on those use cases requires a collaboration form that is much more horizontal or flat, as you say, challenging all the structures, processes, ways of working, cultures, incentives inside these firms. And that's where we live in a daily basis, to really see how these 5G networks are connecting not just us as humans through our mostly iPhones, but mainly industries and different processes across industries and enterprises. So I think this technology is accelerating the need for a flat ecosystem way of working. And we are already in Korea exploring 6G. It may sound a bit bizarre, but we are already exploring 6G, which is taking this step even further. So if you look 5-10 years ahead, what this technology will enable, it gives a sense of urgency to explore and define what these flat ecosystems need to look like to capture the value from that technology.
Thank you. So one of the many interesting things you mentioned is the challenges to the internal capabilities of the firms and how that relates to the external changes in collaboration. I was thinking of you, Matthias Larsen-Kalander, who's working with us on these topics at SSE, but also as an associate at Scania. Matthias, you are specifically focusing on the internal capabilities and how they match sort of the external demands or performance requirements, if you will, on organizations. Could you maybe comment a little bit on how you see the internal organization change to match the requirements for engaging in these types of collaborations?
Yes. I was thinking to go perhaps back to one of the last slides with the three different platforms, because I think what I've seen in the studies I've done is that you get a the more say the device part and the hardware part becomes connected and creating data through sensors and so forth, you get it. Of course, an enormous amount of data generated, but as that data gets aggregated, you get more and more integration into other parts of the organization. And what we see is that all these three platforms that we had in the last slide with the, say, established industry internal platform, the supply chain platform and the industry platform needs to start interacting. And it also, in the, say, services innovation side and the digital side, there are more and more cross functional teams are getting formed into, say, this DevOps teams and things like that. And we see emergence of ways of working that really replicate, say, the bigger internet ecosystem, which makes it a bit interesting. How is that external ecosystem more or less flowing into the firm and the digital innovation side? So there are multiple kind of organizational challenges you will face there.
Thank you. So what you're saying, Matthias, is that the more a company moves towards collaborating and competing in a platform setting, the more it also requires new capabilities inside the organization. So I'd like to bounce that back to Anna-Karin and Håkan to see what you think, what your reflections are on this. Is this something that is, we talked earlier about disrupting as something that happens outside, but what kind of disruption is happening inside your companies? Anna-Karin, would you like to start?
Yeah, it's a relevant question. I think it's probably maybe even more on the inside than on the outside, because as Matthias described here, if you're going to deliver this type of service and digitalization becomes more complex, and then you really need to work cross-functionally, and you need to leave like the old structure where you maybe were like product focused or focused in some other way. So I think it's definitely affecting the way we're working, and we're always setting up the work so that we have looking at both the customer, the technology, and the business perspective when we want to try out new things, and that definitely requires cross-functional teams.
Right.
And also, I would say, to be able to scale, you don't want to end up with just a lot of tests that and then you don't know what to do. You need to have the runway laid out in the organization. Where should you land this? Where should you scale this? Even if you don't know exactly how it will turn out, it's going to land somewhere in the business, and that needs to be set up.
So that's an important takeaway, not getting stuck in running 200 experiments with no scaling strategy. Right? So what you're saying, if I understand you correctly, is you need to already have a reasonably well-formed idea, if not a preliminary plan for how to scale before you, at least in a very early stage of an experimentation.
I guess I would say the key here is that if you connect this to your strategy, where you're going, where will we be as a company in 5 years, 10 years, and then you try out different paths toward this target, then I think 70% of the job is done, because then you should actually form your organization to be able to take care of these concepts. Not saying that it's easy and that it's smooth and that it always works, but I think that is the key to being somewhat successful.
Yeah. So, and this, I guess this also connects to the question we got earlier in the chat about corporate values, because the new ways of working will also challenge assumptions and attitudes and perhaps even values in the firm. So Håkan, do you have the same experience as Anna-Karin, or is your setting different?
No, I think it's very much the same. We are, I mean, we've been in the same business for about 100 years, producing trucks and buses. And over the past 100 years, we've been optimizing the organization and the structure of the company for that business. So we've been working very efficiently in our current business, and that means that we don't have to work cross-functionally. I mean, there's been very little cross-functional work. There's been a lot of line organizations, very clear and very easy working interfaces between the various organizations. But then as you go for a different value proposition for your customer, and you end up doing a totally different type of business, then you suddenly end up with a lot of cross-functional work, because you need to involve the R&D, you need to involve the IT, you need to involve the business, and you need to involve the customer. And traditionally, when we upgrade, when we make a new truck, it's just a machinery. It's a mountain that we've been climbing 10 times before. But now we're going to a mountain that's never been climbed before, and we have to work our way. And that creates a lot of internal friction as well. Who needs to be part of it? Who can contribute? Is everyone aligned on a common vision and a common target? But then over time, that will most likely transform the company, and we will be differently organized over time.
So, but that means that sort of internal governance structures will change, internal collaboration arrangements and practices will change.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking, I realize that Scania is the youngest company of the three we have, right?
We're a startup. So
you're the youngling in this crowd. But one of the things I'm thinking about here is also that, this is an example of three very sort of engineering-driven companies where pride is in the quality of the product. So when you start to move to business models that are much more collaborative, that often means giving up control. You Claire showed this hub and spoke model earlier, and sometimes when companies talk about moving to a platform-based, ecosystem-based business model, they draw themselves in the middle, and then everyone else is peripheral. But in reality, that's not how it works. In reality, you know, it's much more of a network with different actors fulfilling different roles. And I'm curious about how this connects to corporate values and to sort of giving up control, being able to accept the fact that the quality of the service is not completely under your control, as opposed to the quality of the engine, if you will.
I think I could add some there, because I mean, yes, everyone probably perceives Scania as a company delivering trucks, but in reality, we deliver a chassis and then a cab. And we only added the cab in the mid-1960s when we bought a cab producer in Oskarshamn. And that's where we have our cab production facility today. But most of our products, they go to some sort of bodybuilder after it leaves our chassis assembly. And we have a very clear interface, and that's already been part of an ecosystem for so many years. A lot of times also the body build is more expensive than the truck. So we are not the main, the customer could be saying we want a Palfinger crane, for example, and the crane is 3 times as expensive as the truck. And the Palfinger tells the customer, well, you should buy a Scania because they are really easy to mount the crane on, for example. So this is already part of our ecosystem, and that's and part of our history. And I think this is even stronger on the bus side, because we make a chassis with the drivetrain, and then there's a lot of bodywork being added later on. That's when the bus is being created. So we've been out of control for quite a while.
Oh, that's very nice. That's a very elegant answer. I guess maybe if I should challenge that a little bit, I think a key thing you mentioned was clear interfaces. And as long as those interfaces are also its fault, but you know, if you deliver lawn mowing as a service under the Husqvarna brand, then you know, when something breaks down, even if it's the service provider that fails to get the machine working, and it's not, the problem is not really a Husqvarna problem, it's a third-party service supplier problem, then I guess over time, the more blurred the interfaces become, the more value capture you're able to create, but at the same time, the more responsibility you also have to take for the whole service delivery. This is a hypothesis. I just sound like I know what I'm talking about. So Anna-Karin, what do you think?
I think you're definitely onto something there. But I do think we see this also, you know, we're in this situation already when we sell through distribution. And there is the service is not good at our distributor, it's gonna fall on us. Yes. But for sure it's difficult, and it is a struggle, and I think also it's a journey for us as a company to learn from our different perspectives. That you know, when we realize, okay, we have the technology, we have the data, we have the algorithms to understand where our products are, how they are doing. We know how to build this service, but we also then need to understand, okay, how does this affect us legally? And we need to bring that competence with us as well on this journey. Otherwise, it's going to be if you don't do that, the friction is going to be unbearable. But so that's an important aspect, but I think the key is to work out what is your core.
So I think, sorry, please. Yes.
Our core is that maybe it's not you know, the robotic lawn mower. It's about providing really smart lawn care so that the customer doesn't have to care what components are needed. Are we really the best ones there for everything, or who should we work with? And in some parts we are going to be really the owner, but sometimes we are not, and that's probably good for us.
Great. Thank you. This is super interesting because I think both you, Anna-Karin, and you, Håkan, point to the fact that you already have a lot of experiences that can be reinterpreted and reapplied in this new setting. You know, it's not a binary shift in how you operate. It can be seen as much more sort of gradual, or at least building on existing capabilities and experiences. So maybe one more question. I know we're running a little bit late with the Q&A, so I'm going to switch over to a Q&A. I just want to throw out one more question to Jan, related to when you see constellations of companies collaborating using your technologies. If you have if you have seen any particularly interesting sort of best practices, things that can be taken from one context and moved to another context in terms of how to start these more complicated collaborations.
I think that we have seen, or what we see globally, and we are fortunate because in the way that we work across many industries, transport, logistics, manufacturing, airports, seaports, so we can sort of see different patterns in different industries. But I think it's all coming together in the sense that this new technology is enabling completely new types of use cases, applications, and value pools. It's becoming very practical in a way, hands-on. Companies, take an example, we are working with global mobile operators as customers, and a German major car manufacturer, and an Amazon. So you have Amazon, car manufacturer, Ericsson, and a global operator in the room. And everyone comes to the table with different starting points, but we all realize that the only way to find the way to collaborate is to take very concrete examples and use cases. So the whole evolution, the whole development is driven by exploring very specific use cases. In this case, specifically, it's about what is called the precise location of assets. So in a car manufacturing plant, you need to be able to locate expensive tools that get lost and stolen or misplaced, and just focusing on one use case, one enterprise, one industry, and then do that, and then you learn as you go along. So this whole formation of the knowledge of ecosystems and how you play in them is very much a learning experience, a learning journey, and the only way to learn is by doing. So I think these companies, Amazon, Ericsson, Google, car manufacturer, airport in China, whoever it is, one of the key things they need to change internally is to open up to learn, and learn by doing, collaborating in these trials and proof of concepts. So that's the common denominator, I think, across the successful cases across industries, is that companies are willing and able to invest in testing and trialing very focused efforts.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jan. Let's capture a couple of questions and comments from the other participants in the webinar. Claire, do you have anything that you've seen that you'd like to throw out for all of us?
I think one really interesting one from Gunnar was around, it's one thing to talk about collaboration on the inter-organizational level. One needs to talk about team composition as well within the individual organization. And I guess that this is something that all of you have thought about as well. Could you tell us about how you've decided, what you've emphasized in forming your teams for these innovation ecosystems? Jan, I know it's something you've thought about.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think from Ericsson's side, having the insight or the learning awareness that it's only by these type of flat, if you like, ecosystems that any value will be captured on top of the digital wireless platforms that we provide. We have created a couple of teams on group level working with these targeted 10, or I would say up to 15 or 20 companies around the world now. When they go across Google, Amazon, industrial companies, manufacturing operators. So we have a cross-functional team, but it's all, again, led by a focus on the actual problem to be solved, the use case, the value to be created. So we have business consultants, we have technology experts, operational experts, even people focusing on leadership and culture, what needs to change for us to be able to address this. So we work on group level with cross-functional teams, and the customers and partners are responding by similar teams to be able to move forward, because so much of this is unknown. And at the end of the day, what we have learned over the last couple of years is that, may sound a bit fluffy, but it all comes down to leadership and culture. Technology is not the problem. Technology is not the issue. It's really about leadership, culture, ways of working. If you can transform that, then you can use the technology. So that's a challenge for us. So it's a 140-year-old technology company, but it's happening.
Thank you.
And another interesting question was about circularity, circular economy. How have any of you thought about how these innovation ecosystems fit into the circular economy?
I think I have to jump on that one. That has been a focus for us, I would say, like especially the past year, where we've reshaped our sustainability strategy. And we have 3 different areas, and one area is circular economy and circular innovations, where our target is to launch new circular innovations before 2025. And we see that this is really driven and enabled by digitalization, servitization, data-driven services, and it's a lot about sharing platforms, being able to use the product more, and knowing how our products are performing, predictive maintenance, etc., etc. And we opened up to reach outside our company with what we call Sustainnovate Open, inviting startups and other innovative companies to come and help us. How can we become more circular? And we've also worked with KTH to define criteria that work for us. How can we actually then measure that we're becoming more circular, and that we're also affecting our other sustainability targets in the right way? So we're not doing one good thing here, but it's being bad over there. But I think it's become more and more clear that this is definitely ecosystem and platform based a lot within circularity, because it is really about enabling our customers to use our products in different ways, to share them with others, to be able to use them longer. So I think it's tightly connected.
I'm going to propose, Magnus, that we remove the breakout rooms and continue with this Q&A with the panel, because I think there's a lot of really interesting questions here and that would be the most useful. Is that okay?
I had the same thought.
Right.
I'm now looking at the screens to see if anyone looks distraught over this idea, but I'm not seeing that. So I see thumbs up instead. So let's continue with the Q&A.
Great. Another question, and I think this is possibly linked to the team, is the balance between, let's call it, business competence and IT competence. How to resolve that? What is needed, because they have different competences, if you will.
Right, and then that's the question from Tim, right, Claire?
Exactly. I beg your pardon.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Yeah, that's quite interesting. Where Tim describes the situation where you can become sort of tech dominated in the exploration of ideas in relation to other firms. Does anyone in the panel have a experience or reflection on this?
I think Jan said it very good, that the technology is not the problem. Usually we have great engineers, we have great developers solving that problem, but creating the customer value and then transforming the customer value into business value. That's the crucial part. It's normally with the help of DevOps, we normally get very close to customer value. We can create good customer value, but the real challenge is transforming the customer value into business value. And I think once again, it's this has to do with academics as well. We probably need to train more versatile people in the future that are not only system architects or only economists or etc. We need more cross-academic people to join the teams, because there are so many aspects. You can still be experts in some fields, but you need a general knowledge of the other aspects as well, because otherwise you can put it together with the team, but sometimes that's not enough. You need an understanding, a general understanding.
Super interesting. I'm going to, I can't keep myself from commenting on this, but I just want to, since Håkan, you threw over the ball to Jan, I'd just like to check if Jan, if you have any supplementing comment on this topic.
No, I think Håkan and I share absolutely the same perspective, and I think our team did a global study in the last year with about 10 leading operators, partners around the world, to really see what, if you are an executive or a CEO of any of these companies, what are the main, what we would call execution capability gaps that you have in your company that you need to address to be able to realize the value from digital platforms technologies. And the results are interesting in many ways, because you can boil down to basically 3 or 4 capability gaps that they all share, and all of those 3, or let's say the 5 most important capability gaps that these companies have, and this goes from Australia, Japan, China to Brazil and North America, so it's truly a global input. And I think all those 5 capability gaps are in the areas what we call the business and operational capabilities. None of them mention the technology capabilities as an issue or a challenge. It's really to take a leadership team that has been doing the same things for the last 15 years in the same industry, and make that leadership team both understand the opportunity from a horizontal business model on one hand, and on the second hand to be able to go out and start this early on ecosystem collaborations. That's a huge challenge. That goes back to the leadership and culture challenge. So I think that's where we need to focus to understand how these ecosystems are being shaped.
Thank you, Jan. So just a quick comment, because I want to connect this also to what Anna-Karin talked about earlier, because I think my takeaway from this conversation is that first, that the cross-functional teams, agile teams, or similar setups of teams is important to be able to address, to work effectively. But I think what is also coming out here is the need for also individual competence profiles where you are able to bridge different areas of expertise. So I think my takeaway is we need both, right? We need the cross-functional teams. We also need the people who have a cross-functional capability in themselves. And it looks like the response to Tim's question is that don't let IT drive the relationships to others, right? So in those relationships, you need to have the cross-functionality present in order to establish the right type of collaboration. Thanks, Claire.
And if I think, so we have another research project going on in parallel here, which is around goal setting and implementation in AI. And one of the things that comes up again and again is that there's a distinction between competence at the level of goal setting and competence at the level of implementation, one, but also that digitalization means that a lot of the not just skills needed, but professions, if you will, in those 2 different strata actually change. And so you have different kinds of kind of negotiating power. For instance, as data scientists become more important, or you have someone in charge of innovation sitting at the C-suite who actually has a technical background. So it's not just about finding the people with the right skills at the level of implementation, or even about finding the people with the right skills at the level of goal setting, but to some degree that is sort of happening naturally. as certain professions and people with certain professions move up the ranks and thus have negotiating power. So that's something mindful to take into account, that it doesn't have to be deliberate necessarily, although depending on the organization that might actually be needed. There's another question here from Camilo. Can you tell us about the concept of a minimum viable ecosystem? How much is enough in the minimum viable product? Both, I guess, on the level of collaboration, but also in value capture. That's quite interesting and important.
And related to that, the value capture aspect. And I think Anna-Karin, you sort of addressed this partly earlier when you talked about the fact that when you run test cases, you have to also model the sort of the collaboration around the delivery of a test service, for example. But
it's an interesting way of looking at this. I haven't thought about it like this, the minimum viable ecosystem or platform, or not just, we think a lot about it from like the solution and product perspective, like the customer offering, what is the MVP, but this is maybe we do it like in some way, because when you do that and you want to keep it simple, you don't want to bring in everybody at the same time, but I would take that with me and think more about it, because I think we'll benefit from thinking it from that perspective as well.
I agree, but I'm also curious about the value capture part. How I think that relates to the incentivizing question we got earlier. In these situations, how do you visualize the what's in it for me, the answer to the what's in it for me question for the various partners or potential partners?
Of course, there has to be a business value. If it's purely like monetary, or if it's gain more customers, or capture data, or whatever it is. But I mean, I guess that's one of the basics that just has to be there. Otherwise, it's definitely just going to be a test and nothing more.
Right.
I think if I may jump in there, I think that's. I mean, we have seen over the years from our side becoming, back to Håkan's earlier point about Scania being so efficient in its traditional processes, and I think Ericsson in a similar way has become super efficient in testing new technologies around the world, 4G networks and now 5G networks, to really trial the technology and learn. In the last year and a half, as we realized that 5G is completely different from 4G. This is like an iPhone moment of the industry, right? So when we realized that these technical trials and proof of concepts that we are doing all over the world all the time, they are now transforming and increasingly becoming ecosystem trials at the same time. And back to the point of selecting one industry, one enterprise, one use case, and collecting the players around that specific use case that are needed to execute on it. Of course, testing the technology, but again, that's not the real challenge. But exploring how these guys need to work together. We see that changing in how we work as Ericsson, changing the way we set these trials up. Who is invited, how we evaluate them, how we bring learnings from them. So in a sense, I haven't used the term myself, as you say, Anna-Karin, it's new in that sense. But I think we are actually doing some of that in testing, exploring minimum viable ecosystems to execute on very specific use cases. And sometimes the players realize that this is not for them. Sometimes they realize that they are learning a lot of new things and that they need to transform to move forward. So it is an iterative learning process that increasingly are happening, I think, in our business at least.
Thank you.
Really interesting. Another question, I guess, related to strategy, and maybe Anna Essien has the answer to this one. But the transaction complementary and integration platforms. I mean, that's kind of established knowledge rather than pushing the boundaries. What do you what do you see for the future? What are the kinds of platforms that are kind of bleeding edge, if you will? What do they do, and what are the improvements? It doesn't have to be NACENT who answers, but as she talked about that earlier.
I can start, and then you can fill in. Yeah, I think it's a great question. One thing that seems to be challenging and lacking in some platforms is being mindful of how the complementers or the producers on the platform can really improve their business models. So how can they leverage their input by joining the platform and having, so the platform needs to be mindful of, you know, how can we help the participants and the producers to reach new markets, to innovate new kinds of products, deliver new kinds of services. What we see is often that the platform just provides a lot of data, throws it over the wall, sometimes it's referred to, while not really understanding the strategic journey that the suppliers may, or the producer may want to embark on. So not forgetting about the long-term value strived for by the participants, I would say. For instance, General Electric has had problems with that with their platform. So you can read more about that if you're interested. What do you say that you, the other guys in the panel? And girls?
So I have a brief reflection, and that is that I guess you have some integrated platforms where you have sort of a back-end innovation oriented platform, like a development platform, and then you have a front-end part, which is the customer-facing part. I wonder if that could be systematized more, if that could be sort of implemented more systematically across different types of platforms, so that you don't just have a stable transaction platform, but you really also have a back-end innovation ecosystem that can feed into the platform, delivering new services. You could even imagine, let's say, if you have a platform-based ecosystem for autonomous transportation, you could imagine that you're sandboxing an innovation environment where you open up participation for actors that are not already on the platform, but who can use data on the platform to experiment with new services. And then sort of almost like you create a pipeline from the innovation part to the production part of the platform. I don't know if that, Håkan, is that something that you or Jan, is that something you've talked about?
I think this also relates to, I think there needs to be very strict interfaces and guidelines. The easier it is, and this relates to Matthias Larsson Calando's research, the easier it is to access information and the link towards the internet, the easier it will be to continue to develop the platform. The easier it is for other players and the more defined and clear rules that are for interaction, the easier the platform will be to develop over time, and the ecosystem will expand. So I think there is a lot of, and I'm very eager to see more of the research that Matthias is conducting into that field regarding the information structure and how to do that. So let's wait and see. Let's have a new webinar in a couple of years' time.
Let's do that.
Just to pitch in on that, I think that one of the interesting things we are in the middle right now is when we combine, or when we are in meetings with friends at Google and Amazon, and we start to understand how these companies operate, and what they bring to the table when we build these ecosystems is of course the developer ecosystem in itself that these companies carry with them to the table, and the way these developer systems and Amazon, Google operate, and how the culture and the way they run their business. And we start to understand that, we realize that by combining that huge developer ecosystem on top of our global 5G network, when they look at that, they see what they say, this is a network as a platform. We haven't really thought about it in that way before, but Google is seeing 5G as a global network platform upon which they can add thousands of application developers using APIs that are coming from the 5G network being exposed to these app developers, which means that we have a front end in a way that we have never had before in terms of thousands and thousands of application developers across industries leveraging cellular technologies in terms of 5G to really enable completely new use cases. So I'm just speaking from the top of my head now, but I think that to your point, Magnus, Ericsson can then be like a back-end production facility, if you like, in the ecosystem, enabling by providing these global cellular network as a platform, which is a very different way of thinking about what we do than we have done in the past. And then you start to expose your mind to these application developers and what they want from you. And that's where we are at the moment. That creates a very interesting dynamic by having Google engineers together with IKEA people and Ericsson people and Telia people in the same room. So I think that creates this sort of front end and back end potential of an ecosystem. Good.
Interesting.
We do have another question from the chat that we haven't touched upon. How do you share IP in a setting like the one described by Jan? Would you like to share that, Jan?
Yeah.
One's mind.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's. I think again, you meet different attitudes from these companies when you bring them to the table to discuss how we can work together to realize new types of values and use cases. And some are very protective about the assets they bring to the table, and want to be very clear on how we manage those assets. And others are much more open. I think it's a bit shocking to us, again, when we start to work more closely with these cloud providers from Silicon Valley, hyperscale providers. Again, the culture, the level of speed, agility, and innovation that they bring to the room, it's dramatically challenging the way we think about our own intellectual property, our assets we bring to the table. How do we leverage these assets in a very different way? And I'm not saying that these guys have all the answers, but they are so fast, they are so global, they are so quick to scale. So you basically don't stand a chance, to be honest. You need to learn how to operate with these kind of companies, and they need to adapt as well. So I think we are learning. I don't have a clear answer to the question, but we are learning as we speak that to be the more open you are, the more willing you are to experiment with your existing assets in new constellations, the faster you can create value. And if you don't do that, you can bet your last Singapore dollar that somebody else will, because they will move around you, under you, or above you to get to this value. That's why I say it's a bit shocking to start to work with these companies, because you learn about, again, cultural leadership in the digital time, if you like.
Matthias here. Just to add to that, I think what is really interesting, if you look on the innovation ecosystem that happens out on the internet when you have exposed resources through APIs and so forth. And I think what we have seen over the last 10 years is also reduced technical complexity. There is a lot of standardization and simplification of the APIs used. And on top of that, and connecting it to IPRs is also that you get a kind of legal standardization through more standardized legal contracts. So when you want to sign up and use a resource, I mean, the legal agreement is already there. And then how that flows into the organization, I think it's, or looking how to move into an internal organization, is that it's really about the innovation architecture that we have touched upon, and the models we use in the external ecosystem, how to combine the resources and how to share knowledge, expose knowledge and information internally. I think there's a lot to replicate. And I think we see signs of that in some organizations. So you are essentially creating an innovation architecture internally as well, or an internal ecosystem.
Thanks, Matthias. That's very interesting. So I guess I realized that we could keep going here for another hour, but I think we said that we would wrap up in 2 minutes from now. I have a final comment from Gunnar von Koch, which is interesting, relating to cultural leadership and sort of the move fast and break things culture of Silicon Valley, which is not necessarily conducive to creating and sustaining public trust. So maybe, as I think this panel has indicated, the partnerships means that if we can get good partnerships to work well, then we can bring different skills, abilities, and sensibilities perhaps to the table, and maybe that will actually be helpful for some of the Silicon Valley fast movers as well in the long run. Although some may already have lost their soul, I don't know. That's a topic for a different webinar, I guess. Okay, so thank you on behalf of all the organizers of the House of Innovation and the Stockholm School of Economics and our collaborator in the Swedish Center for Digital Innovation. Thank you so much for joining us today. And a special warm thanks to Anna-Karin, Håkan, and Jan in the panel for sharing your super interesting and super important experiences and ideas. Likewise to all the participants for terrific questions. It's been delightful to tap into your thinking and you sharing your thinking with us. And my feeling is, Håkan, that we don't have to wait for a couple of years to have the next webinar on this topic. I think we haven't solved all the problems yet.
Sure.
So with that, Anna, Claire, any final thoughts from you guys? Matthias, all good? Yeah. So let's then end perfectly on time. Claire?
Perfect. There's I think it's a hand up from Ivo. Did you have a last comment there? No. Oh, it's a round of applause. I beg your pardon. Thank you everybody for your insights and your frontal lobes this morning. Great to have this conversation.
Terrific. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.